Welcome to The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in. Folks, we got a great show for you this afternoon. First, let's talk about what is happening between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States. There are global leaders that have been meeting in Belgium, in Brussels, and we're going to break it down to you as to what is the latest, some of the big developments in this situation. Also, let's talk a little bit about the last day of the confirmation hearing for the Supreme Court for Judge Jackson. We'll be breaking it down for you as well. And of course, we got HBCU to the rescue as it relates to African students leaving Ukraine and so much more. So stay with us. It's a lot to get to on this edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. All right, folks, welcome to the show. Welcome. All right, we have so much to talk about as it relates to this issue of Ukraine and Russia. Leaders are meeting for a number of summits right there in Brussels, Belgium. You have the EU, you have the G7, and all of these leaders, and of course, NATO. And all of these leaders are trying to figure out, well, what is the next step? What is the best way to deal with this situation with Russia and Ukraine? What is the best way to get the message across to President Putin that he needs to stop the attacks on Ukraine? Now, I want to bring you up to speed on some of these big things. And then in a moment, we'll be bringing in Dr. Gerald Horn, who has been excellent in providing some analysis around this whole situation. But let me just share with you folks. Yesterday, I shared with you that the U.S. has officially declared that Russia has in fact committed war crimes. This is one of the big developments in here, and how this situation is going to be handled, how President Putin may be prosecuted in this situation. And anytime you're talking about war crimes, you're talking about, folks, when there is an intentional attack on civilian targets. An intentional attack on civilian targets. And when the U.S. government has seen some of the latest attacks by Russia on the Ukraine theater, hospital, a nuclear power plant, these all meet the criteria of war crimes, according to the Biden-Harris administration, according to the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. He has officially said that. And there is a loud and growing chorus of calls for the International Criminal Court to pursue Vladimir Putin for these unprovoked attacks on these civilian targets. So that's one of the big storylines around this situation. Also, the president is and has been meeting. It's been reported, folks. The president has been meeting with a team of national security advisors over these past couple of weeks. 2 to 3 times a week he's been meeting, and today officially marks 30 days since this conflict has started, since Russia started dropping those bombs on Ukraine. 30 days already. And as a result of that, the president has been meeting with his national security advisors, and they have this team called the Tiger Team. And this Tiger Team is trying to work out scenarios on how to approach Putin and how they're going to respond to these various situations. So that's happening. Also, Ukrainian President, Mr. Zelensky, has appealed to NATO in his video remarks to NATO today in Brussels. He has appealed that Ukraine needs more assistance, military assistance especially. He asked NATO for everything from guns, armor, tanks. He simply said, if you give us 1% of your arsenal, then we will be in a better shape. basically saying that the world is seeing how the Ukrainians is holding up against the Russians, and that the extra military assistance, the extra equipment would help them to sustain the resistance against the Russian attacks. And then finally, we got to talk about the fact that the U.S. has now announced, without any specificities, that it will accept 100,000 refugees in the country. So, 100,000 folks who are fleeing Ukraine right now will be coming over to the United States. When that will happen, we don't know. Who will that be? We don't know. But we'll just know that that is happening. As of right now, a little bit over 3 million people have fled Ukraine, and at this point, we're still seeing people coming in. Where will that put the African students? So many folks are asking about that at this point. There are students that have been able to leave Ukraine. Some students are still left in Ukraine. Some have been able to move to Poland. But there has been more conversation about what to do with them. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I want to bring in Dr. Gerald Horne, who has been providing his analysis on this whole situation, his expertise. And also we are joined by our correspondent, Ashley Banks, who's a writer for Essence and many other publications. But Dr. Horne, thank you so much for joining us. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
And Ashley, good to see you again. Thank you so much.
Good to see you as well, Farajii.
Dr. Horne, let's talk here. We've been saying it. Look, Doc, I don't know how many people are going to understand that this situation is evolving very, very fast. When you're talking about two nations going to war, it's generally a slow process. I mean, every day, Doc, every single day, it seems like there's and not just a small development, like something dramatic is happening. I mean, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around the fact that Putin has talked about possibly using some level of nuclear weapons. I'm wrapping my mind around the fact that President Biden has responded to that threat by saying that if he does move forward on using any type of nuclear arsenal, we will respond. The president just said that this afternoon. And all of these other things. This is breakneck speed. And maybe it's just because I'm just never paid attention to it, but it just seems like this whole process has gone from 0 to 100 very fast over these past 30 days.
You are absolutely correct. And let me underscore what you mentioned a moment or two ago about the so-called Tiger Team, which is the U.S. agency, the U.S. committee that's looking into the question of weapons of mass destruction, be it chemical, biological, or nuclear. They say from the Moscow side, but of course, if they're planning defense, they may be planning offense as well. Secondly, with regard to these 100,000 refugees from Ukraine who will be arriving in the United States of America. Now, the record shows that I'm not anti-immigrant, I'm not anti-refugee, but I am anti-white supremacy. And I recall all too well what happened on the Texas-Mexico border just months ago when Haitian refugees were trying to get into the United States and were treated in a very rude and discourteous manner, to put it mildly.
Right.
I would hope and imagine that part of that complement of the 100,000 would include some of these African students who were just ousted from Ukraine and were treated very rudely on the Ukraine-Poland border. And then thirdly, it's interesting that the United States now is talking about bringing the Russian leadership and soldiers to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Many in your audience are familiar with the fact that the ICC has been disproportionately wielded against leaders from Africa. Recall Charles Taylor of Liberia, who's now languishing in a cell because he was dragged to the ICC because of alleged depredations committed in West Africa. But keep in mind that it was only recently that the United States was imposing sanctions on the International Criminal Court because they thought the International Criminal Court was going after the United States with regard to the misdeeds it committed in Afghanistan. So it's rather curious that all of a sudden that the United States is thinking about opening this case against Russia in the ICC, not to mention the fact that the United States is not a signatory to the charter that established the ICC, which raises questions in my mind as to how they will be able to walk into that court. And then the most pressing point is that this might just be theater, because it's more than a notion to talk about detaining Vladimir Putin, a man who has his finger on the nuclear button, and dragging him like the United States helped to drag Charles Taylor of Liberia to The Hague in the International Criminal Court. Part of the problem is that for the last decade or more, the United States has been involved in conflicts with relatively small countries. Libya, 2011, 7 million people. Iraq, 2003, about 24 million people. Afghanistan, beginning in 2001, about 40 million people. Russia has a population of about 150, 160 million with the aforementioned nuclear weapons. So I hope and I trust that the United States, in opening this door with regard to the ICC, has a plan, has a roadmap, and that this is not just theater.
And you said that you hope, but how much, if you had to quantify that hope, Dr. Horn, how much hope would you say?
I think it's just ratcheting up the tensions, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah.
I think that the other point, of course, I think you mentioned this as well, is that the United States is going to pressure Indonesia to not invite Russia to the Group of 20 meeting in Bali, Indonesia. The Group of 20 includes South Africa, Nigeria, some of the largest economies on planet Earth. As of now, the only full-throated endorsement for sanctions against Moscow are coming from the United States and its North Atlantic allies. That is to say, Canada, the NATO countries, the European Union, etc. In the so-called global South, Africa, for example, there's not one nation that has spoken up in favor of sanctions against Moscow. The same holds true with regard to Asia. And here's another point that should be referenced. As we speak, the Chinese foreign minister is in New Delhi, huddling with his counterpart in India. This is important because the United States had thought that India was going to be on its side with regard to this confrontation with China. But what's happening is that India is under pressure to impose sanctions against Moscow as well. It's not very happy with that. And so now you see the spectacle of the Chinese foreign minister for the first time in years arriving in New Delhi. That could be a game changer.
That certainly can be a game changer, Ashley. And when you look at how things are playing out at this point, Ashley, I'm really wondering, and I know that, you know, this is what I've been talking with Dr. Horn about, this idea that America is not going to be pulled into this war at this point seems like a pipe dream. It seems like it's inevitable at this point, between the rhetoric, the rhythm, the planning, and the preparation that the United States is putting together. If anyone with eyes can see, we are going to be dragged into this situation. We are essentially, and I'm saying we as this country, President Biden is taking ownership of being like the world's Avengers at this point.
Well, Farajii, obviously at this moment, the U.S. is doing everything that it can, right, when it comes to, for instance, Biden announced sanctions today, more sanctions against Russia, where he's blocking sanctions on more than 400 individuals. He's banning transactions in gold with Russian central banks. So he's basically doing what he can in order to not get as involved, where Putin will say that the U.S. is warring against Russia, which could have devastating impacts for this country. So it will be interesting to see how much further Biden is willing to go. But as Dr. Horn was saying, the ICC has launched an investigation into Ukraine, and so, but that could take years before before we see any war crimes or charges against Vladimir Putin. And like Dr. Horn said, when it comes to Russia isn't a part of the ICC, neither is the U.S. Ukraine isn't either, but Ukraine allowed the ICC to have jurisdiction over the country. So it's just going to be interesting to see what happens here. It could be theater, like like Dr. Horn is saying, or we could see real consequences. It's just time is going to have to tell here.
Ashley, what do you make of Ukrainian President Zelensky going before the NATO countries and asking for that artillery, to asking for military assistance? What do you make of that? He said, according to Zelensky, he said that, he's been asking. He said, look, we're pretty much at our wits' end on our side of things. We need help. Mm-hmm. And he's not cutting any corners. He's not, he's not being as diplomatic or politically correct. He said, look, we need help, and I need some weapons. I need some tanks. I need some guns, all of those things. What do you make of that?
Yeah, he asked Poland and Slovakia, he's saying, hey, we need your warplanes. We need help here because Russia has the forces. They've been preparing for this. We haven't. So we need your assistance. But it seems as though Poland and Slovakia are a little hesitant because they're afraid of the backlash that could come from Russia. They don't want to look like they're aiding in this war at all. And so Zelensky, he's desperate. And as you can imagine, a president in that situation, many presidents probably would have fled the country, but he remained there and he's doing his part to try and protect the citizens that are there. Too many people are dying. There are way too many casualties that are being tallied up every day. So he is doing what he can and trying to get outside help from different countries to stop this. He really wants to protect his citizens. He wants to stop Russian arms. So you can just imagine putting yourself in his position that you would be begging for help as well.
No doubt. Yeah. Oh, no doubt. No doubt. And Dr. Horn, I know I would be begging. I would be super desperate. But do you think that decision is going to be made with these global leaders in Belgium, that they are going to decide to give Zelensky and the Ukrainian government some equipment?
Oh, undoubtedly. As a matter of fact, I'm sure the planes are in the air with the cargo as we speak. But I trust and I hope that Washington has thought this through. Recall that the plan is to create a new Afghanistan for Moscow, this time on Russia's western border. Recall what happened when in the 1980s, the United States dropped all these weapons into Afghanistan. Some of them got into the hands of so-called terrorists. Osama bin Laden himself arrived from Saudi Arabia along with many of his comrades. And before you knew it, you had an attack on New York and Washington on September 11, 2001. Now we get these reports from the Washington Post, amongst other outlets, that a number of white supremacists are flooding into Ukraine to prop up the regime. Let us hope that Afghanistan is not repeated to that same extent. That is to say that they will gain skills and expertise that they will bring back to the battlefield known as the United States of America.
I want to, and here's one of my big concerns, Dr. Horn and Ashley. My big concern is the fact that if the United States is planning to move forward, we really do have to understand that this country is not in a position to try to put out these global fires and put itself into a position to defend Ukraine and its NATO allies in this particular conflict. I went to, and I had to think about this because this morning, I'm watching the news, I'm reading the reports, and then I said, well, let me act. If we have the military power, because I think a lot of people, whether you're black or white or Latino, I think a lot of people tend to believe that America's military is at its peak power, that we are at the top of the list. And according to the data that I saw, we have about 1.3 million active duty troops, and then a little bit less than 1 million non-active duty troops, reserve troops rather. And one of the things that the Heritage Foundation, and Shayla, if you could put this is what the Heritage Foundation, they put out a report called the Index in October of 2021. And I'm gonna just read this, folks, just for you to see it. It says, because America is a global power with global interests, its military is tasked first and foremost with defending the country from attack. Beyond that, it must be capable of protecting Americans abroad, Americans' allies, and the freedom to use international sea, air, space, and cyberspace while retaining the ability to engage in more than one major contingency at a time. However, check this out, folks. The U.S. does not have the necessary force to meet a two major regional contingency requirement and is not ready to carry out its duties effectively. Consequently, as we have seen during the past few years, the U.S. finds itself increasingly challenged by major competitors such as China and Russia, and the destabilizing effect of terrorist and insurgent elements operating in regions that are of substantial interest to the U.S. This is from the Heritage Foundation from October of last year. It's saying we don't have the capability as a military to deal with all of these small minor fires and then to go against our competitors, one being the one we're going against. We're talking about Russia. The other, China, is still on the sideline, so we don't know what role they will play at this point. But that's concerning for me, Doc, because, and I'm not trying to put the cart before the horse. If the U.S. is trying to put out all these fires, and then we got this big fire in Russia and Ukraine, where's the extra power going to come from for this military? Where the extra bodies, the number of soldiers are going to come from? And I'm concerned that this situation, by it being so fast now, it may not get to this place, but they're going to have to start calling on the American people. There's going to be some great sacrifice. Dr. Horn, and I'll let Doc, I want to get your thoughts, and then Ashley, I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, we're already experiencing the sacrifices. The price of a gallon of gasoline is hitting north of $6 per gallon, north of $7 per gallon in the state of California. That'll probably be the case from the Atlantic to the Pacific sooner rather than later. Already, because of this conflict in Eastern Europe, you see that starvation is erupting in North Africa, along with protests. And we have a number of food insecure people right here in this country, as evidenced by the fact that many survive on food stamps. And then with regard to your wider point, it's not only China and Russia. As we've been paying attention, understandably, to Eastern Europe, the North Koreans have shot an intercontinental ballistic missile into Japanese waters, a close U.S. allies, supposedly and purportedly. They're soon, if they don't already, have the capability to launch a missile across the Pacific as well. And at the same time, NATO has decided that NATO troops will be increased in Bulgaria, in Romania. There will probably be a complement of U.S. troops within those deployments. So Washington really needs to do some very serious and deep thinking, because right now it seems the United States is becoming overextended, and it's getting in over its head.
And that's one of my biggest concerns. That's one of my biggest concerns, Doc. I mean, if we can't handle, and I know that the narrative is going to be, look, we're going to do this part, we're going to defend our allies, all of those things, the very, the moral things, the very, aspirational ideas behind this. But I'm talking about when you start looking at what we actually have, the resources, when you're talking about the political will, when you're talking about bringing all of these pieces together, I really don't believe that we have what it takes, especially when you're talking about who is going to sign up for this war. Who would be, if they instituted a draft, and again, I'm not trying to put the cart before the horse, but I'm saying if they were to institute a draft because they need more military support, who is going to be running to your nearest Marine, Army, whatever, military office to sign up? I just don't see that. I just don't see that. Look, I got to take a quick pause. Dr. Holm, we'd like to keep you on just for a few moments longer, if that's okay. And then Ashley, I want to get your response to this as well. So, folks, we're going to take a quick pause. When we come right back, let's continue the conversation around this Russia-Ukraine conflict and how do we plan to move forward on this scenario, given all of these latest developments. Stay with us. It's The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, we've been given and having a conversation about the latest developments in the Russian-Ukraine conflict. I've been talking to Dr. Gerald Horne, who is a professor from the University of Houston, who has expertise in everything from foreign policy to race relations. And we're also talking to journalist Ashley Banks, who have been keeping her eyes on what's been happening. Ashley, to go back to my previous point, looking at where we are, and I'm talking about the capacity of the United States of America being able to deal with this conflict with Russia and Ukraine, and then at the same time still being the global super police that it currently has, because there are little fires popping up all over the place. And who's to say, Ashley, that the longer that this conflict, this war between Russia and Ukraine continues, that these smaller fires won't turn into a blazing fire?
Yeah, Farajii, it's going to be interesting to see what takes place if the U.S. does get further involved and, let's say, puts boots on the ground, for instance. Obviously, a lot of people in this country, Black people specifically, would not want to take part in what's happening in Ukraine. We saw what Dr. Horne was talking about earlier when it comes to the discrimination that Black refugees were facing. And once that news broke, when people saw that these Black refugees were not being allowed to exit the country and were basically being treated like second-class citizens, Black people checked out. Yeah. Black people were not interested in what was going on. Yes, they feel bad for the Ukrainians who are losing their life, but at the same time, seeing what was happening to their sisters and brothers essentially in another country, it was heartbreaking. And many people would not want to get involved. Obviously, those who are active military members have an obligation to serve this country and to do what they're told to do. But let's say, for instance, you're saying there are other fires going on, right, in other countries, say that this country needs more manpower. I'm not sure how many people would be willing to sign up and fight on behalf of Ukraine. And so it's going to be interesting. I'm not sure if the U.S. is going to get involved. As of right now, Biden is not saying that that is what's going to happen, as he just keeps putting out these sanctions. But if the U.S. were to get involved, it would be interesting to see who actually steps up.
And that's the part about this. And I think, again, we just had to make it clear, Dr. Horne, and I'm saying, and as in terms of Black America, my big thing is if we look at how this whole situation is playing out, if Biden decides that he doesn't want to, that he decides that, you know what, enough is enough, we're gonna have to do something to Putin, and he's moving towards some type of military response. I'm wondering, what are Black elected officials in this country, the Congressional Black Caucus and other Black elected officials, how are they going to respond? Are they going to say to the Biden-Harris administration, a Democratic administration, we're not moving forward because it's not in the best interest of Black people? It's not, or would the Latino representative say, hey, it's not in the best interest? I'm trying to figure out what is the pulse of the people or of these elected officials, because there's no way that the narrative, and I'm trying to think about it. I'm a man of communications and media, but I'm trying to figure out what is the narrative, what would be the storyline to get people to be all in being a part of this conflict.
It's going to be very difficult. Now, thus far, you see support for Biden's foreign policy in the Congressional Black Caucus. Even Congresswoman Barbara Lee of Oakland, Berkeley, who quite famously, after the attack on New York and Washington in September 2001, stood against intervention in Afghanistan, even she has come around. The problem is that I'm not so sure how popular her initiative is with her constituency. Mm-hmm. Like any elected official, she wants to get reelected. She hails from Oakland, Berkeley, one of the more progressive, left-leaning constituencies in the U.S. House of Representatives. And even if you look at a figure like Gregory Meeks, who is in the CBC and is chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which means he wields a significant amount of power, he hails from Queens, New York. Queens, New York is not a community that's thriving right now. A moment or two ago, you raised the classic conundrum of guns or butter. That is to say, can the United States afford military interventions and at the same time afford aid to healthcare, aid to education, food stamps, and all the rest? That came up decades ago with regard to the war in Vietnam, and you saw that was a factor leading the United States to pull out of Vietnam. So my assessment right now is that support for this Biden foreign policy right now in the Congressional Black Caucus is about a mile wide and an inch deep.
A mile wide and inch deep. So Dr. Horner, I'm curious in regards to, getting your response and reaction to what President Biden said today. He said that if Putin moves forward on using nuclear arms of any level, that the U.S. will respond. What does that mean in your mind?
Well, I'm not sure what it means because.
So Dr. Horn, I ain't the only one that's like trying to figure it out either. I guess me and Ashley, we just like, okay, what does that mean?
Well, the worst case scenario is that Moscow launches nuclear weapons, and then that'll be the end of the United States, unless it's a so-called tactical nuclear exchange, unless it's a so-called limited nuclear exchange, in which case Mr. Biden probably would up the ante, and then Mr. Putin would have to up the ante. So we're on a very slippery slope right now. That's why I think saner heads are basically saying that what we need right now on both sides, on all sides, is de-escalation and negotiation. The president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, has offered his good offices for mediation. So has President Erdogan of Turkey. So has the Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett. I think that there are a number of avenues open for de-escalation and negotiation, and let us hope that both sides can see the way to follow that route.
I mean, I would actually, when I listen to Dr. Horn, I'm like, I wish he was just one of the advisors, because I'm not sure if the cabinet of President Biden or anybody in the White House is thinking. I mean, I'm sure they are, but we often talk about, Ashley, like when any of these major wars happen within the last 20 years of this country, last 25 years, there have always been those who are called war hawks within Congress, of course, within the White House. And people don't realize that you got actually war hawks on the Republican and the Democratic side. Like that war works out for some people in the best interest of of other interests, to say the least. So when you have a situation like this, where you really have to rely on people to use the best of their intelligence, and then at the same time walk the very fine line of not seeing weak. And that's what I think what's happening with President Biden. He's got to walk that fine line of using the best of his intelligence, using the best resources, but still being firm enough to the global community to say that enough is enough. And I'm just not, I don't see it, Ashley. I think he's going to slip and fall off of that fine line very soon.
Yeah, that's a good point, Farajii. So as we know, Ukraine is not a NATO member. So essentially the US can only do but so much. But Biden does have to do what he can to hit Putin where it hurts. And that's what he's doing with his financial pockets. But we don't see Putin slowing down. And I'm sure you've seen Zelensky mention that Putin's not going to stop at Ukraine. Many people believe that he's going to keep going and possibly could invade future countries. Obviously, that is not something that is on the books, right? Or anything, or Putin hasn't said that. But many experts speculate that will be the case. And so, yes, Biden has to walk that fine line of not making it seem like he is waging war against Putin where Putin can retaliate, but he's also doing what he can to stop Putin. Because right now, as Dr. Horn stated before, we are seeing serious consequences as a result of this war. We are going to see starvation take place in parts of Africa and the Middle East because these countries have been trading with Ukraine and Russia. And now, because of this war, they're not receiving the necessities that they've been getting for years. And so as a result of that, they are on the verge of starvation. And so if something isn't done, then we're going to see catastrophic consequences for a lot of citizens in this world.
A lot of citizens. Let me just say this very quickly, Ashley. There was a missed opportunity that the Biden-Harris administration did not take full advantage of, which was when Vice President Harris went to Poland to have her chat with the Polish president, and then not making the trip to Africa to offer aid, hell, some comforting words, something. I think that was a missed opportunity. And we still haven't really heard. We have been talking about this food shortage situation in Africa for the past couple of weeks since this whole situation kicked off. And there has not been, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there has not been any level of engagement with anybody, with any country in Africa on the impact of that. It's been on the Ukraine, it's been on Poland, but nobody's talking to Africa about that part of this whole conflict. Have you heard anything, Ashley?
I have not. I've only heard about the starvation taking place in parts of Africa. Wow. In the Middle East, but I haven't seen anything come out of the White House. I also haven't been looking, so I'm not sure as it pertains to that. So they do say something because these people need comforting. I mean, come on. If we were on the verge in like 3 months of not having food or our food supply being cut off due to war, we would hope that somebody would be coming to our aid and finding ways to give us the things that we need to continue to survive. So.
Absolutely. Very quickly, Caden Baseball Footage checked in and said, look, we just exited a ground war for 20 years. Any person with military knowledge knows the current military doesn't want to enter into a repeat of that. No one. We just left Afghanistan. It felt like yesterday. 20 years of that, Dr. Horn. 20 years. And now you got your Tiger team. You organizing global leaders in Brussels. You're moving all types of ways, and it looks like you're preparing for another situation. And let me just say this as we wrap up this part of the conversation. We are going to have to come to a very, very important decision. We're at a crossroads in this country. First, let me talk with Black people in this country. The big question that we are going to have to ask ourselves is, where do you stand on this conflict? We have to be very, very sure about where we stand. And that's just not just for Black people. That's for white people, Latinos, any citizen of this country. We're going to have to be very, very intentional and clear about where we stand on this. This cannot be a wishy-washy issue. Well, I'm going to just see how things go. Things are going. And we have to be very direct and intentional and very strong, because guess what? In the midst of all of this, new narratives are going to come out. A level of propaganda is going to happen. And guess what? We're all going to be tried on how strong is our foundation, and are we able to survive the onslaught of information, misinformation, lies, all of those things. You and I are going to have to be very, very strong on where we stand on this situation. And as we close out this conversation, Dr. Horn, I will continue to blow the trumpet on this platform, saying, Black people, we got a lot before us, but we cannot go soft or weak. And when we say that enough is enough, we can't be pulled into the situation. And I know without a shadow of doubt, any dissenter of this particular military operation, the potential of us going into military, any military for this war, we're going to have a chorus, not a solo, in terms of dissenting against the situation. Dr. Horn, you got the final word, sir. What's your take?
You're absolutely correct, because keep in mind that Black leaders have gotten in hot water, oftentimes on the question of foreign policy. When Dr. King, for example, opposed the war in Vietnam in 1966-67, when Paul Robeson was opposed to the war in Korea, 1950-1951. So you are correct. This is no time to be wishy-washy, particularly since we realize the stakes are immense. We're not talking about Libya, Iraq, or Afghanistan. We're talking about a nuclear-armed power that actually has more nuclear warheads by some measures than the United States of America. And perhaps even more ominous is the point that right now, the fate of the planet may depend upon lawyers in Moscow agreeing with lawyers in Washington. Lawyers in Washington say the United States dumping an arsenal into Ukraine does not make the United States a co-belligerent, a comrade of Ukraine that should then be attacked. Let us hope that the lawyers in Moscow agree, because if they do not agree, then they would say they have a rationale right now to attack the United States of America.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Gerald Horn, we truly appreciate you. Thank you always, dear brother, for taking time out of your busy schedule. We know that, this thing is going to continue, so we'll be tapping on your expertise once again very, very soon. Thank you, Dr. Horn.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, Ashley and I are going to just break down just a little bit of the last day of the confirmation, the Supreme Court confirmation for Judge Ketanji Jackson. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all. All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, we want to take the time to just give you just some quick analysis for the last day of today's Supreme Court confirmation hearing for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Of course, for the past 4 days, Judge Jackson has been answering questions from both Republicans and Democrats about her judicial philosophy and her decisions and a whole lot more. During the course of those past 3 to 4 days, we have seen big moments where there has been some absolute political theater to moments where we have a better understanding of what Judge Jackson could possibly bring into the Supreme Court. I want to bring back correspondent and journalist Ashley Banks on this. Ashley, when we look at what has happened, this is the final day. At this point, I think a lot of people feel confident that Judge Jackson was able to kind of get through this arduous process in a very, very dignified and professional manner, even with all of the bickering and craziness that's been happening. But there's still a couple of other steps that's required to get through in order for this confirmation to happen, to be a reality.
Yeah, that's correct. So next Monday, March 28th, the Senate Judiciary Committee, they're going to consider her nomination. And then on April 4th, that's when they will vote on her nomination. And so we don't need Republicans to vote in favor of Ketanji. If every Democrat votes in favor of her, then she will be confirmed. But as we saw this week, like you said, there's a lot of political theater. We had Senator Ted Cruz asking her if babies are racist. We had Senator Tom Cotton asking her policy questions, like what percentage of murders are solved in America, things that she cannot answer because that's not what she covers or what she does as a judge. We saw other senators like Marsha Blackburn asking her to define what a woman is. Like what?
What the hell?
Definition. Obviously, we have dictionaries and you can look it up, but basically they wanted to catch her and see where her ideologies lied when it came to what she thinks of, let's say, the LGBT community and transgender and all this other stuff. And basically they're criticizing the progressive movement and how people are viewing this transformation when it comes to sexual orientation. But these Republican senators could have used their position in a better way to get real answers from Ketanji. Obviously, their job is to ridicule her. Their job is to ask her really tough questions because being on the Supreme Court, you're there for the rest of your life and unless you want to retire. But the questions that they were asking were just senseless, made absolutely no sense. But Ketanji did a really good job keeping herself composed, like you said earlier, Farajii, where anytime she was being asked a ridiculous question, she responded and said, essentially, that is not my position as a judge. Like she had to keep reminding these Republicans of what her position is and what she does as a judge, which is like ridiculous. And I'm sure it was annoying for her, but she did her job. She did her job and answered the questions that she could. And those questions that were out of control and just completely ridiculous, she did a good job handling them. Now, Mitch McConnell basically compared Republicans ridiculing her to the way Democrats were going up against Brett Kavanaugh and saying that's just what happens. But the Republicans, Mitch McConnell was saying that the Republicans weren't going after her nearly as hard as the Democrats went after Kavanaugh. And you and I could completely disagree with that. And we saw how Kavanaugh did not handle those questions properly. And he was pretty emotional. And so for Ketanji to be the complete opposite and to really just be composed and answer these questions as a dignified woman, the dignified woman and overqualified woman that she is, it was a sight to behold.
Let me, you know what? And Ashley, I know we don't have enough time today, but we're going to have you and I and some other folks, we're going to have a conversation about Black women being before, white men, in particular, older white men, and the expectation of how a woman should carry herself, the presentation. Like, there was a lot, and I think that's kind of part of the unspoken part of this whole scenario, is that she recognized that the world especially was looking at her. So she knew, unlike Brett Kavanaugh, when he broke down and got into them spaces, she knew she had to carry a certain burden. And it's just a whole different conversation, because Black women have been doing that for so long. I mean, you know the history. So it's sad, because when other people do it, it's one thing, but when you see a Black woman, she has to keep her game tight all the way to the very, very end. But to your point, this is something that we will certainly see. And I think that, like you said, we got this April 4th vote that's going to be happening. There will be a final Senate vote, which is yet to be scheduled. You mentioned it. Democrats can confirm if everybody in the Democratic caucus votes in favor of her, with Vice President Kamala Harris breaking the tie. And so at this point, she may not even get on the Supreme Court with any Republican votes at this point.
Right. And that's what a lot of experts have been saying, that basically the Republicans were coming after her to try and knock off of those 2 to 3 Republicans that may be voting for her. They were trying to find a way to weed those votes out.
Well, I know the big thing is that they're trying to get a final vote confirmed, or get her confirmed before the Easter recess. So my fingers are crossed, Ashley.
Same here. Would be nice to see the first Black female Supreme Court justice. We would all love to see that. So same here. My fingers are crossed, Farajii.
My fingers are crossed. Ashley Banks, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time with us today. We truly appreciate it. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, Farajii.
Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's switch gears. Let me talk about how one HBCU is coming to the rescue for African students that are stuck in Ukraine. And we can ask the question, what about other HBCUs? Have we limited the power of HBCUs on the world stage? We'll have that conversation with educator Rashad Staton. Stay with us. It's The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, let's talk about HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. And we already know, and we've been having conversations about this issue, the struggles and challenges that HBCUs are currently facing, from everything from bomb threats to enrollment to financial aid and funding. Well, it looks like things are changing for at least one HBCU. That is Hampton University, or some people would say the real HU. I'm not getting into that conversation here. But Hampton University is doing something that I truly and personally hope will manifest itself into a domino effect. And that is, they have decided to say enough is enough and extend a humanitarian offer of support for to between 50 and 100 students fleeing Ukraine amid its battles against the Russian invasion. Now, let me just share with you what Hampton President Dr. William R. Harvey announced last week, and let's put that up there. Let's put that up there. The collective Hampton University faculty, staff, and students are heartbroken because the war-torn country of Ukraine must deal with atrocities like the bombing of maternity wards, hospitals, and other civilian areas. I think this partnership is something that can be beneficial to a great number of students and families. And now look at this, folks. That was from Hampton University President Dr. William Harvey. When you think about the role that HBCUs have traditionally played in dealing with not just issues related to their campus, but they have played in dealing with national and international issues. I wanted to bring this story to the forefront, bring it to you, because I said to myself, this is the direction that we want our HBCUs to go in. We want them to go into a place where they're not just seen, but they're seen and heard. And I'm really excited. I'm really excited that Dr. Harvey is deciding to move forward on this situation. I'm very, very excited about this. And I think that this is the best course of action that HBCUs can actually play, is that you can do something in this whole Russian-Ukraine conflict. You can use your campus as a platform for change. You can use your campus to bring about some difference in a world affair. Now, folks, let me just share with you some more about this, because, you know, when we look at HBCUs, we often are looking at the situation of dealing with these things and then just, we just want to teach students and just learn about it, and then they go off and matriculate into the world. Well, no. You want to there's nothing like being a part of a situation like the current moment. There's nothing like teaching your students the value of service when there is an opportunity to serve. There's nothing like it. And for Dr. Harvey to use his campus, I'm very excited. Now, this is not the very first time that Dr. Harvey has done this. Back in 2019, he reached out to Dr. Rodney Smith, who serves as the president of the University of Bahamas, who had served as the vice president for the administrative services at Hampton. And he offered a similar agreement to students from the University of Bahamas after its North Campus was destroyed by Hurricane Dorian. I don't know if any of y'all remember that, but that was a big issue. So here's how this situation worked. And we're going to be checking in with Rashad, who is an educator. He is a graduate of the HBCU, the Great Morgan State University. Here's how this whole thing is going to play out. The students from Ukraine and its international attendees, they can travel to the U.S. and take the advantage of the opportunity that will receive room, board, and tuition. Check this out, folks. I mean, this is dynamic stuff here. They can receive room, board, and tuition all at the same time, right? And also, let me make sure I get my notes here correctly. For the summer of 2022 session, and we'll have the option to stay at Hampton University at the regular tuition and fee rates in the fall. That is a beautiful, beautiful thing. That is a very, very beautiful thing. And I want to bring in Rashad Staton to give us some insight onto this situation and see. Okay, we're bringing in Rashad. Okay, working it in. This is the beautiful thing about this whole situation, folks. This is the beautiful thing, that if you have an HBCU that decides to move, if you even have a president of an HBCU that decides, hey, we're going to do something. We're not going to sit on the sidelines. We are going to get into the field, and we're going to get into the field of change. That is a huge thing, a big thing. And I'm very excited. Here's my only concern about this. Y'all ready for this? Here's my concern. My concern is we have a little bit over 100 HBCUs in this country. What has stopped all of the other HBCUs, or how can, and I'm not approaching this from a negative point of view, but how can we engage those other HBCUs to be a part of this work of bringing people from Ukraine and making sure that these African students have a home, have a place to go, and they can continue to learn? That's the big thing. How can we do that? How can we work on strengthening? And I know the HBCU network is very strong in this country. You know, a lot of these HBCUs, the presidents know each other. They're getting some of the same funding from other places, resources from the same place, and all of those things. How do we strengthen the network to make sure that network, even though you're dealing with all these other challenges, but that you are showing that you are serious about making sure that the Black student, whether they're at home or abroad, is their interests and their needs are being met. All right, now we got my man Rashad. Rashad Staton, thank you so much for joining me, brother, as a true proponent and advocate of HBCUs. What's your take on this whole situation?
Oh, man, doing what's necessary, placing now HBCUs leaderships in a space that's timely, in a space to work collaboratively, in a space where it's no competitiveness around funding nor sustainability to the impact and the legacy of it, but also understanding like the global impacts and intentionality that goes between HBCUs and how it always attests to the larger world itself, how they're going to service their communities, how do we service ourselves in the diversity of the young people and the non-traditional students that attend our HBCUs. I think it's needed in particular, but let's dive a little deeper. What in particular, Farajii, from me, that you want to give my input to this particular situation. Like HBCUs has always been the rescue component to much of upward mobility and development of Black people, communities, and across the diaspora.
Well, and I mean, and that's the big thing, and I guess the big part of this, Rashad, is, you know, how do we position HBCUs to, and I know some of them are doing it right, and I'm not going to cast this wide net saying, oh, HBCUs aren't doing it, don't doing anything outside of what's happening on their campus. We know some HBCUs are doing things in their respective communities. But I'm saying on the world stage and big moments like this, you know, how do we make sure that we start to activate and engage? And let me just say this, because I know some people are watching and say, are you saying that the HBCUs don't care about Black students outside of their camp? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying some HBCUs are a little bit further along than others, right? You and I know that, Rashad. They have some HBCUs have a little bit more money, have a little bit more resources. They have depending on how that HBCU structure, like for example, Morgan State has a board, but everybody doesn't have like a board that they respond to. They might have to respond to the state or wherever they are. Right. So some HBCUs can do a little bit more than others. I'm just simply saying, how do we make sure that HBCUs aren't on the background, bring them to the forefront, and making sure that they're keeping that tradition of social justice, of thinking about the interests of the global Black student at the heart of the matter?
Yeah, I think you know, what one is, I think the first one is to be very, you know, compassionate and respectable to the diversity of the students themselves. A lot of our HBCUs have international students, right, that are of African descent, that are other descents across the globe, and to be mindful that these young people are part of your student body and your student population. So although that they may be taking courses virtually or in person on your campus, that these young people still call the other places where they're coming from as home. So how can the institutions themselves be a part of this family tree of where they consider themselves as home? So the next part is outside of relational and respectability of the students and their diverse backgrounds. The second one is our HBCUs must create a coalition of leadership across the countries, and that's are mindful of the scale and the differences of our HBCUs per the fundings that they have, their credibility, and those HBCUs that have a international department that actually allows for global exchange programmings, to apprenticeships, to internships and things of that sort, that these countries and places across the globe that have these partnerships with our HBCUs are receiving some monetary gains from it. So in those monetary gains, we got to put in clauses that they're actually putting in place things and policies and criterion to make sure that we are upholding our humanity. That when we come and deal with these global conflicts, the HBCUs on the on-site have already discussed what will be their approach, what would be their stance, what would they be willing to be oppositional to, and what they are not in favor of and what they are in favor of. But if everyone and if the HBCUs across the country don't have these things already particularly put in place prior to, we become in a place where we're forced to be reactionary, which is the current place right now. So absolutely. I think what we need to do, like, these situations are always going to happen. You know, history is always going to repeat itself. And just like we were vital to the progression of the civil rights movements, we need to be very, I want to say, very concise in what we're going to do with these global movements and how they're going to directly impact our student populations.
No doubt. No doubt. Look, we're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, more with Culture Crew member Rashad. And as we talk about the power, the impact of HBCUs on the global stage. Stay with us, folks. We got a lot to get to right here on The Culture, here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network. I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends. Go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have that you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.
Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.
Folks, we've been having a conversation about HBCUs to the rescue. I've been talking to Culture Crew member Rashad Staten to give us some insight and his analysis about how Hampton University is opening its doors and extending an olive branch to African students that were once studying in Ukraine to tell them to come to America. And a lot of these students, you were talking about a number of students, 50 to 100 is what Hampton is able to accommodate at this point. A lot of these students are looking for homes. They're looking to continue their education. They don't want to just go back home. They want to finish their education. And Hampton University is saying, hey, we can accommodate you. We can work with you. We'll find you room. We'll find you board. We'll keep you here during the summer. And since you signed up for the fall as well. And I'm just asking, first, I wanted to give the flowers to Hampton University and its president, Dr. William Harvey, for even, setting up a partnership of this magnitude. But then to see, okay, how can we take this model and possibly extending it and strengthening it for other HBCUs to get engaged and involved. So let me bring Rashad, who is an activist and educator, back into this conversation. And I think that one of the things, Rashad, as you are an advocate, you know the power of unity. You understand that when HBCUs kind of not get out of its own way, but when they see their role as being a global institution, that makes all the work. That makes a world of difference, especially in a moment like this.
Yeah, I agree, and I like how you named that. Our HBCUs are global institutions in the sense that they are the access point to a lot of us that are in America, but we are not just educating, informing, and developing American students. We're developing young people all across the world of African descent or a part of the diaspora themselves, and even other minority and ethnic groups that these institutions, similar to what Hampton has become the catalyst of, need to replicate and expand on the same approach. One, it lifts up a value of our institutions to show that we are much bigger than what oftentimes people try to say, but also we have the resources, we have the needs, we have the supports, and we have the infrastructure to build out our student populations and can offer supports in timely manners. We've seen our HBCUs institutions do other things when we have had our own, I want to say, disastrous moments in America ourselves, from dealing with the, Hurricane Katrina to other portions when you want to say lights and things went out in certain parts of the country, and electricity, that our HBCUs often open up their campuses to be safe havens in a sense of these opportunities to expand and allow young people to continue their ongoing matriculation of education. Why not take these young people that once saw fit to be in Ukraine and other places across the world to say, hey, come to America and we got a place for you that's here for you to continue, but also to expose you to, these institutions that were created for you and those like you to now dive back into, us extending our home and saying, this is your second home, extending our arms and saying, this is your additional home to make your own.
Absolutely. Now, the other part about this, I think, Rashad, is something that I think we need to bring up into this conversation, because I did not know this. I did not know this until this conflict kicked off. I did not know that there were a number of Africans who looked to Ukraine as a destination for their educational achievement, right? I did not know that this was the top destination for the continent of Africa, for students who want to study medicine and study engineering, that Ukraine was a top destination for them. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I really didn't know that.
I was aware. Once I started to see those implications of racism show up, and certain Africans or those that were in Ukraine weren't allowed to, to get on these trains and to go into other places that they have designated for others to go to rescue and haven, I started to realize that, okay, some of these folks that are finding themselves to share out their voice are students. Lift up and where those institutions that they were studying at. And one thing that clicked in my head of a question of why didn't they consider America itself? But also some of these other countries themselves offer free education.
Just real quick, bro, isn't it because of the distance? Isn't it because of distance, cost, and just some of the logistical details?
Yes, of course. The close proximity to, some of the countries that they're coming from the African continent is very close into the Ukrainian, and some of our African students are even studying in certain parts of Russia, right? So there's a twofold approach of how they're experiencing this global issue. But again, like you said, a lot of it is the structures that was already put in place, whereas though these institutions are some of their top priorities or their preference themselves, but it also calls into question what can we do better to make it even more affordable from America's standpoint for others to see the value of them trying to explore their educational values here in our country, right? And if there is someone that want to lead, that should be leading this charge, it should be our historically Black colleges and institutions. So I think this opens up a door of opportunity that our leaderships, those that are from the state and those that are funded at either being board of trustees or board of regents in our institutions, they have the academia, right? They have the insight, they have the intellect that we may have to build another strategy to bring sustainability to our institutions and offer how we can provide that for others. If we are going to other countries, how can we revert the opportunity for them to come to us as well? And also it calls the question that, hey, America may have to do something with the cost of education here when it comes to higher education, because now we're put it at the latter end of a competitive market when it talks about global education and academia.
And I wouldn't agree with you more, Rashad. And let's look at this other fact. The nation, and I'm saying Ukraine, hosted more than 4,000 students from just Nigeria alone. But the data shows that up to 80,000 other international students have been present in Ukraine. So we're talking about a strong number of Black students, of African and international students who look to Ukraine, who have been ousted because of this conflict, and who could potentially come to America, bring that same level of brilliance, bring that same level of insight, bring that same level of diversity to HBCU campuses. I mean, there are big opportunities. But what do you, and let me just go back to this point. Medical doctors, engineers, two top schools that I can think of that speaks to that, along with Hampton, Howard, Morgan.
Yep.
Howard and Morgan. Now, look, again, this is not to throw shade on any HBCU. What I'm looking at is, what do we do? Or rather, let's look at the model that Hampton University has, duplicating that model. If you have Howard and Morgan State University saying, "Hey, we could take 100," Howard saying, "Hey, we could take 100." Spelman, "Hey, we could take 100." You know what I mean? And then here's the thing, Rashad, because this is always the issue. Say to the government of the United States, you owe these students, you should pay for their education.
I agree. I think
you should give us some special funding to house these students, to educate these students, to basically accommodate these students. You owe that to them. You know what I'm saying? And I know you didn't get the chance to hear the first segment that we talked about this conflict, but I saw it as a missed opportunity, bro. And you let me know if I'm right or wrong on this. I saw it as a missed opportunity that when Vice President Kamala Harris decided to, and the Biden administration decided to move forward on, start making these trips out to Ukraine and to that part of the world. Vice President Harris went to Poland. President Biden is in Europe. Nobody stopped in Africa. Nobody stopped in Africa. We talked to the Ashley Banks. And she said, I didn't see no report of any U.S. official coming to check in with, say, the Nigerian president or anything to have that conversation. Nobody stopped in Africa.
Yeah.
Nobody. Matter of fact, I don't even think Vice President Harris, and again, this is not to throw shade, but I think that we can be critical, because this is not about personalities, it's about principles, right? So if nobody stopped in Africa, then what is America going to do on that part of the conflict? Especially when that part of the conflict about the trials and tribulations of African students is now publicly known. Why hasn't there been any leeway in making sure that those students, or the countries that these students are coming from, why nobody's reach out?
Agree. I think, like you said, a missed opportunity, but it calls into question, again, this opportunity for disruption and innovation. So with that, oftentimes when the government doesn't come to our assistance, or don't come to the beck and call of what should be needed, then we have to look back to our agencies and our institutions to fill those voids and those gaps. And then to look at the accountability of those countries on the African continent to say, okay, what are you doing to make sure that these places where you're sending your students have some things in place to make sure that you are the young people who are going to bring investments back into your country is going to be the generation that moves your country forward, are protected when we send them elsewhere. And what is the clauses of when situations like this happen and they're not on their soil and their land that they call home, that they have someone that can be reliant and have an open communications and some things to put in place for your safety in return. But also, if you need to go elsewhere and then you may have to come to America to forward your education, that these countries themselves has already established a partnership with the HBCU institutions that are here that are willing to extend their arms. I think when the government doesn't do their part, we now have to look at our in proximity to our communities, agencies, and institutions that have the willpower, the currency, the insight, and the relationships to fill those voids. And if not, we're going to look around and we won't have nothing when we could have been very proactive in that sense. And then this calls into question. Now we have these situations. Now we know what the federal funding budget should be for HBCUs if something like this ever to happen again. And in that policy in itself, it can say, hey, the government can underfund or provide particular fundings to help us expedite these problems if they ever come to fruition again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come right back, let's switch gears. Let's talk a little bit about parenting. Have you found that as a parent, if you are a parent, even if you are a step parent, foster parent, I'm just saying, if you take care of children, have you found yourself being in a place or feeling like where you need to teach your child not to be you? Or you look at your child, you look at this little person that you're taking care of, or might be a big person, and you realize, you know what? This person is growing up to be like me. We'll have a conversation about that level of parenting. And of course, we have later on Trends Post and Doing the Most. So stay with us. A lot coming at you in the final 30 of the culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, if you are a parent, you know that there are many challenges. There are some joys and some pains that come along with parenting. Well, one of the big challenges that we often face as parents, and I'm a parent of two. Rashad is a parent of one, unless you had two or three more, Rashad. I don't know, brother. I got to check in with you about that thing. But, you know, one of the big challenges is raising a child who's just like you. And this was the topic of an op-ed in the New York Times when one writer by the name of Jessica Gross, she talked about how her daughter is just like her, and that even at the young age that her daughter is, she can see various characteristics and traits and just mannerisms and behaviors that are similar to her. that she is still dealing with even at the age of 40, that she sees her daughter going through. But one of the things it brought to my mind, Rashad, is that when we parent, there seems to be this this school of thought that when you are a parent, right, you want to create a mini me, right? And I remember when we first had our son, there was my wife and I had a big conversation about the name, right? That's always a big part, right? You're like, what do you name your child? And I remembered like so vividly, bro, that my son, who is 8 years old, I did not want to name him Farajii. I did not want to give him my name. I didn't want him to be a junior. I remember I was like, no, I want my son to be able to have his own name. He's going to be his own person, right? Because why? I mean, first and foremost, I know people that be like, oh, I want my name to live on. Like, I know my name is a beautiful name. I get that. I'm not taking away from that. It's just the simple fact that I know he's my son. Like I don't have to brand him and be like, he's the son of Farajii and there. Like, I know he's my son. So with him being my son, I know that this is something that I knew it from the very beginning. Like, I wanted him to be his own person. Now, certainly he has some characteristics and qualities, but he's growing up to be his own person. And I think that for parents, that can be a challenge. Some parents, they want their child to be just like them. Other parents, like me, it's like, no, you don't have to be just like me. You will already have certain elements of me. I want you to be better than me, actually. I want you to be a different person. I want you to like different things. My son is into science. He's into technology. He's into soccer. These are areas that I was not involved in when I was his age. And it's okay. I'm actually enjoying watching him grow up and enjoying the fact that he has different interests than I do. I'm enjoying that. I don't want my son to be a mini me.
Yeah, I would say I had similar preference when my son was born as well. I was very hesitant on giving him my name, and I agree with you. I didn't want, and I have nothing against those that continue the legacy and share down their names and have juniors all the way to the 4th and to the 5th. I think it's a beautiful thing of honoring your family, your lineage, and your heritage. I think it's one, but even in my sense, I didn't want to allow my son to carry my name because I wanted him to grow and evolve into his own individual purpose while still, gaining some of the goods of me, but also learning of how dad evolved, shed, and let go of some of the bad parts, right? And I remember as I was growing up, my dad didn't have a dad, right? So my dad's ultimate goal and biggest purpose, he said, I wanted to be an example of what I never had. Right. And my dad said, I wanted to be that example because I wanted to make sure that if you was to evolve in yourself, I wanted you to have the good parts of me. And if I had to deal with anything bad, at least it's the bad part of me that I got to correct in me. Right. Rather than seeing you being raised by someone else. And I don't have that hindsight or the strengths to help you navigate them because I wasn't there in your life from beginning to end. And I took that same approach. My father always told me, like, hey, some of the things I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to understand. But when it comes to it, you're going to be able to apply it in real time. Right. So it was just those different nuggets that I applied to my son. But I also was very intentional in just making sure that the name I gave him, he can grow into. And it honors some of the ancestors and the lineage of my own family. Like, I want my son to bear my last name, but he doesn't have to bear my
the last name is, last name is pivotal. The last name is pivotal for me, right? I mean, I have the last name of Muhammad. My wife is Muhammad. So, that's pivotal. That's going to stick, right? But I think that to your point and to your dad's point, like, and I met your dad, so I know what kind of man your dad is, right? But to that point is like, you want to make sure that you put your child in the best position where they can be themselves and express their individuality.
Agree.
Right? And that's, Rashad, I can't tell you enough, bro, like how important that is for me, because I'm so different from my father. My father's been in my life my whole life. So I thank God for that. I'm so different than my dad. Like he actually, bro, I'm so different from him that he don't understand. That he looks at me, he like, man, you like an alien or something, right? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But we do have similar traits. But this writer, she said something about her daughter. She said the hardest part of parenting is raising a kid whose personality reflects my own like a mirror. She said, my discomfort comes from watching my daughter struggle with the same things I continue to struggle with at 40, and knowing in my heart that these issues may plague her all her life, and that there may not be much I can do about it.
Yeah, that's heavy.
Bro,
that's heavy.
Bro, when I read that, hey, Rashad, when I read that, the scripture came to my mind that, you know how they say the sins of the parents are visited upon the children?
Mm-hmm.
That's what popped into my head.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Here's the thing that I think a lot of parents, especially young parents like us, right, that we don't always see. Like, if you don't, like, the shortcomings, the flaws in your character, you may not always see the consequences of that. But if your child possess some of those same characteristics, they may see a harder or stiffer consequence to that.
Correct.
Which is why I think it's important. Like, you know, yesterday we had a conversation about family planning because we was talking about Mary J. Blige and everything, and her deciding not to have children. It's like when you have children, and I don't know if we're having these extensive conversations before we lay down with somebody, but if you're having children, you really do have to think about your internal self, your shortcomings, your flaws, and if you have certain struggles within yourself, that situation might be passed to your child. If you're not, say, for example, if you are not the person that has that value schoolwork, coming home, doing homework, if you're not a person that values structure within a household, and then when you have children, that's manifested where there's really no structure. Your child come home, they do whatever the hell they want to do. They don't do their schoolwork. It just comes back on you. That's the thing about having children. It's like, whoa, this stuff comes right back on you. So that's a heavy, heavy burden to bear, especially if you're not trying to make yourself better, if you're not working on any level of self-development.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that particular and your perspective on that. I think what everyone just needs to be, what we all could be more mindful of is exactly that. And when you're thinking about family and you're thinking about parenting, understanding that, you know, some things are out of our control or what we can pass on. One is the biological and the genetic makeup of our child, right? So if we are dealing with certain health implications, we are dealing with certain social and emotional things as well that can be passed down, and that will eventually manifest itself as your child is growing into adolescenthood, and how their brain anatomy and development allows them to see the world and react to the world that's around them. So those things are some of the things that are out of our control. But in our dieting, our practices, our mindfulness, those are things that we can correct over time as well, right? And we got to be mindful and courageous enough to have these conversations with our children as they are showing up. I think sometimes we think that it's too late or too early to have certain conversations. Like my dad always said to me, I'm going to give it to you right now, even if you're not prepared for it, because I know you heard my voice, and my mom says the same thing. I know you're hearing my voice. When you are ready to receive my message, you'll know when to employ what the message was that I gave you years ago, or the second before you made that action or determine which decision you was going to make. The second one is this: a child first teacher is the parent. A child is going to learn through observation and what they hear. Right. So if a parent, oftentimes our mannerisms, our personalities, our character, our charismatic type of approaches, either though we're introvert or extrovert, right? Those are things that a child will start to observe and develop with unknowingly to you. So you start to see the little mini you, because they're observing you when they couldn't even open their mouths and try to ask what is going on, right? From your tone to how you receive and you respond to things, your level of calmness versus anxiety, how you're navigating stress. Do you have a balance between your schedule and when you cut things off, or when do you recharge? And we even see it in education, right? And that shows directly to how well we probably are doing academically, or how we exceed with these standardized testings, right? If we're in parents that are more educated use a certain more words in their vocabulary. So when you go and take a standardized test and you got to pick what's the name of this entry point to a brick and a mortar, and you say door, but the answer is really looking for you to say threshold. You never said the word threshold in your house. You just say, get your little butt in this door. They don't know what that's the same word or the same synonym to it. So it shows up in everyday life, and you're not with your child 24/7 to help them navigate it through. But what you can do as a parent is go on your own journey of wholeness. And we all know, some of us know our blind spots, some of us know our gray areas, some of us know our strengths, and some of us know our weaknesses. I know for me, my son helped me like totally go face forward on what are some of my weaknesses, what are my blind spots, and let me correct these now, so that he will not learn, have to not go through the same things that I had to go through to figure out who I am.
Hey, Rashad, let me just tell you something, brother. And this is something, and I don't know if this, like, I was born, when I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, this level of parenting, this knowledge of parenting, I don't think it was around. I think this is a new place that we find ourselves in as adults and as parents, right? That we look inward in order to manifest something greater on the outside of us, right? Like the real parenting starts based on how you think, how you process, how you've dealt with, trauma and other experiences. That's where the real parenting starts, right? And back in the day, if you grew up in folks watching, if y'all grew up in the 80s and 90s, you know how parents were. It was like you didn't ask questions, right? You didn't question your parents. Your parents would often tell you that, watch what I do, or watch what I, listen to what I say and not what I do. Give you some backward ass type, understanding, right? I mean, the line between parent and child was so stark, like the distinction was so clear, that the child grew up not asking questions, really grew up and I remember feeling this way at some point, like, I'm afraid, I don't even want to know, because it seemed like you and me, we are like light years apart. When I looked at me and my dad, I felt like, oh my gosh, we're like light years apart. So you don't understand. And so I think the culture of parenting has changed dramatically.
Agreed.
Over these past 20 to 25 years, bro. Like, I've never seen this, where parents are, you have so many different styles of parenting. And I think that that's important, that you got to know, and that's to get to your point, when you say you got to know your strengths and your weaknesses, you really do have to know yourself before you should become a parent. And once you do become a parent, you should always recognize yourself. And I mean, like for this writer, I mean, she says she's 40 years old, right? And still dealing with some of those same struggles. And she's afraid that her daughter's going to have to deal with those for the rest of her life. But let me just share with you that experts say, look, they're going to use even though they might have the same struggle, how they process it, how they experience those struggles, the circumstances, they're all are going to be different.
Yes.
Than what you as the parent or we as the parents have experienced. And I think that is the number one thing. One clinical associate assistant professor of psychiatry, behavioral science, Dr. Pooja Lakshmi, said that she said something that I think is really, really important. She said, when it's something that is so closely, let me go to this one. We can put this back on, Shayla. Ilsa Dubro DeMarco, a clinical psychologist and the author of Mom Brain: Proven Strategies to Fight the Anxiety, Guilt, and Overwhelming Emotions of Motherhood and Relax into Your New Self. She said, is to continue to remind yourself that even though you're similar, your kid and you aren't the same.
Yep. Agreed.
They're not the same.
You are projecting your own lived experience on a child that's going to grow up in a world that's a little bit more advanced, a little bit more different, may have a different progressive mindset. Yeah, they may still have some of your biases and prejudice and your fears, but again, your peers or when you went through elementary and grade school is not going to be the same young person that they're sitting with through elementary and grade school.
Bro, the world has changed over the past 30 years.
They might not exist there no more. The fashion itself is going to be a little bit different. The music is going to be different. So, of course, they're going to internalize things and try to have their own level of understanding. And what oftentimes parents have to often accept is that you can't safeguard your child from the whole world itself.
You can't.
You need to give them tools.
And let me just say to that point, Rashad, when you said projecting, that's one of the big things that I saw growing up. And that's something I always keep in my mind as I'm interacting with my son and my daughter. That what I was afraid of, what I was concerned with, that I don't project those same fears. Because parents, we have such an influential power over our children that we can project fear. Even though the child may not be afraid of something, we can pass on our fear to them. One of the big ways that we see that, especially with Black women, and this is, and I want you folks and sisters hear me out on this, that if you are a mom, whether you're a single mom or you're attached, it doesn't matter. But if you're a mom of a Black boy, you project your fear on to your Black son. When he walks out the door, you project your fear of the police. You project your fear of the neighborhood. You project your fear just in general, just fear. And in some cases, depending on the boy, how he's going to process that fear. Whether he's going to process that fear and be like, Mom, I'm good. I got you. I understand what you say. I know you're afraid, but I'm not afraid. Or whether he's going to process that fear and say, yeah, I can't. Mom, you're right. You're right. This is scary. I can't go out there.
Which is to determine it on the child, based off of the projection of the parent.
And you know, and going back to the doc's point that we just showed, your child is different. So you really don't know, and we really don't know what type of individuals. I mean, your child is one way in the house, they're a different way when they're out in the streets.
And probably,
you know what I'm saying? And then they're a real different way. Say it again, bro.
And then be a completely different person on social media.
And then they got like a third personality on social media.
So how you run?
You know what I'm saying? Or they got a fourth personality when they're with their friends, right? And then they grow up. When they grow up and become, not just they go to high school, they go to college, they become adults. They're a different person.
Yep.
And a lot of times, parents, and I've learned this, and I remember having this conversation with my dad one time, man. Like, Pop, I'm a grown ass man with the whole family. Like sometimes as parents, we do get caught up in this time warp on how we see our children. And so, we still kind of interact on our children based upon how they were when we were living at home.
Yeah.
Pop, I'm different. I tell my pop that, Pop, I'm different. I'm totally different. You can see my children. You can see my wife. Like we're different. Like we're dealing with things a little differently than how you used to deal with it, or how you used to think, or how you think you saw me 10 years ago. That's not my issue anymore.
I'm thinking from like a biblical, and the spiritual component to it is like, what it says is a child should eventually lead, right?
That's
so
it.
As a parent, you should want to raise your child to the point that you understand our human life cycle, that as you get to a certain age, more than likely the child that you are rearing, protecting, and loving for will eventually have to take care of you.
Absolutely.
So you want to build in that heart pulse, that mind, that compassion, that way of sustainability, and that way of insight, that when they come to a point where the tides have turned and now they have to wipe your butt again, or they have to move you around, right? That they are more mindful and they understand your humanity, that they'll do right by you because you did right by them. But one of the things is like you can't rear your child in hopes that you rear them so that society doesn't rear them for you, right?
Absolutely.
I think that right there is projection of fear that then doesn't allow them to grow into their own individuality and experience their own level of freedom and how they define their success. But one thing that has stayed constant, even in my early experiences of fatherhood, that one of these, the most wisest things is always the most simplest things that roll out of people's tongue. And the one thing people always said to me was, there's no right or wrong answer to parenting. And you can't you can't raise one child as you raise the other one, because you're not going to get the same outcomes.
Come on, there it is. There it is. There it is. Hey, Rashad, we got to take a quick moment. I want to take a quick pause. When we come back, I got to share with you what's trending right now. Trends posted doing the most. Stay with us. It's The Culture.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
All right, Rashad, I had to bring up this trend. People are talking about this, man. I just need, anything related to Mike Tyson, y'all, I'm going to just let y'all know. I'm bringing it up.
We bringing it up.
Bro, this Mike Tyson is one of the funniest dudes, man. If you ever watch like The Hangover or any movie he's in, he's just funny. I already told you about his podcast. But let me just tell you about this big moment, this crazy moment that he just had. Check this out. A couple of days ago, Mike Tyson was about to perform at a Hollywood comedy club when a man pulls a gun on him at the damn club, Rashad. This happened on Tuesday when an unidentified man was filming, interrupting a comedy set to challenge Mike Tyson to a fight in a deranged attempt to elevate his status.
Doing the
man
most.
Tries to play off the situation and yell out, "I don't give a F." And even though there's footage of it, we can't show the footage, but he pulled out this gun on him. And they're trying to take him away. But Mike, being who he is now, remember Mike used to be called Iron Mike Tyson? He was hard-hearted and cold. Remember that, y'all? Oh, Mike Tyson. He de-escalated the situation by talking to this man and then eventually giving this man a hug.
That's Mike.
He hugged it out with this dude that pulled a gun on him. First and foremost, let me just tell you, I don't know this dude's name, but he better thank God that Mike Tyson didn't respond like the way Iron Mike Tyson probably would have responded. First thing, because there's actually footage. I don't know if you've seen this footage, though. They got this footage of Mike Tyson just like he's on the set of something. He's joking and somebody kind of little play jab. He turns right around. He starts getting into his position and stuff. And I'm like, everybody's like tripping like, yo, Mike still got it. Bro, you pull a gun. Now, Mike ain't from no place where, he's from hard place, man. He's from a hard place. So you know, if you would have pulled a gun on Mike Tyson years ago,
he'd have had to revert to
he would have had to dealt with you right then and there. But he's such he's a changed man, and so he at this point he's just like, look, man, I'm all about love and peace. Let's just de-escalate the situation. Well, they wind up de-escalating the situation. No one got hurt. The man was pushed out, but Tyson called the man over, goes for a handshake, and the two of them hug it out. The man then screams, "New York, Brownsville." Of course, where the place that Mike Tyson is from.
Doing the most. The guy doing the most.
Yo, he does.
And what Michelle said, when they go low, you go higher. Mike went higher because he would have took him up to another space. But thank God that man turned a new leaf. And man, Mike is out of this world at this point. I watch Hot Boxing with Mike. His level of awareness, we should all be grateful of, because he's still fit to be destructive, but he is building rather than being destructive.
I think he dealt with a lot of his demons.
Yeah.
I really think Mike Tyson has dealt with a lot of his demons. And now we're seeing a very a redeemed, restored, reformed man. So big shout out to Mike Tyson. And I'm gonna shout out, man. He looked kind of weird in that picture. Isn't that crazy?
That's like Mike to me.
He looked like he'll still whip your ass. But the point is, he'll hug it out, folks. This is not the same Mike Tyson. But don't ever think that you can pull a gun on this, because you might just caught Mike on a good day. He might just like, man, I'm laughing, I'm drinking, I'm enjoying myself. It is what it is. But if you come up on him in the street, oh man, it'd probably be a different ending to this story. You know what I mean? Yeah. But see, and the crazy thing, as we close out, Rashad, the crazy thing that is about this story, the things that people will do to get a little viral or viral fame. All of this to elevate his status. You pull out a gun on a boxer just to elevate your status. That is
ended up leaving with a hug.
And then you ended up with a hug. Now you've gone viral, but you've gone viral not for the same thing that you wanted to go viral for, but it's incredible. Social media, that's a whole different conversation.
Hey, at least he got his ear intact. At least he got his ear intact. That's
his ear and his face, Rashad.
Right. He better be great.
You know Mike
it could have went a lot worse, but it went right.
He would have punched him. Dude wouldn't even know what to do with the gun. Gun jamming and stuff. He all nervous.
He just take it and break it for him. Here you go. This what you wanted? This what you wanted for?
All right, Rashad, thank you so much, big brother. Always a pleasure to have you on the show and being one of our culture crew members and essentially being so good for the culture. Thank you, bro.
Thank you. Always for the culture. Peace.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. But I appreciate each and one of you and all your patience in watching and checking us out today. Hopefully you enjoyed the conversations. But look, we got so much more to talk about as it relates to this Russia-Ukraine situation. So I'm convinced, folks, we have a big decision to make. We have a big decision to make that as we go further along, as this country and this administration goes further along, the voice of dissenters have to be a chorus. It can't be a solo. It can't be a one artist or one person, or just, it has to be a chorus, right? And for us in the Black community, we have to be very clear. We got to let our public officials know, our elected officials, look, we're not going to just go for the bobo. We're not just going to go for the propaganda. We're going to scrutinize this decision if it goes to that point, right? But we're not going to sign up for a war that is not in our best interest, in a war that we cannot win. We don't have the human capital to do that. We can't just waste lives over a lie or because of some ego or some personality. No, the next war we fight for is going to fight for truth, justice, freedom, equality. It's going to fight for something that's going to lead to the interest and the betterment of people, and not for the interest and the betterment of corporations and pockets. We're not doing it. We're not doing it. All right, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you show your support and love for Black Star Network. Go to our website at blackstarnetwork.com. Support Black-owned media like never before. If you can't support us, with your finances, with your dollars, then you can certainly support us by sharing all of our videos, tuning into our programs, and just sharing it. Let people know the Black Star Network needs your eyeballs, but we also need your financial support. So go to blackstarnetwork.com to make that donation real. I thank you so much. 6 o'clock. Stay tuned for Roland Martin Unfiltered. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Peace.